The corridor of death exists in dozens of countries, and in each place it looks different. Somewhere they let you choose a last meal, and somewhere they do not warn about the execution until the very last hour. Do you know what is the scariest part? Not death, the waiting. Today on TopFacts, an honest and very difficult journey through the corridors of death, from America to the Middle East and Asia. Who chooses injection? Who? The electric chair. And where does a volley from 12 rifles still ring out? Watch to the very end. Believe me, it is insanely interesting. What is the situation in America by 2023? Approximately 25,200 people are awaiting the carrying out of their sentence in the death corridor. In 24 states, the death penalty is in force. In 23, and in the District of Columbia, it is abolished. It is applied for so-called capital crimes, murder, treason, espionage, and in some jurisdictions, for particularly grave cases of violence against children. The methods of execution are known to everyone, but each time they look equally cold. Lethal injection, the most widespread, a series of drugs leading to the stoppage of breathing and the heart. The electric chair, the gas chamber, and, in certain states, the firing squad. The last night for the condemned usually passes in a solitary cell. Phone calls, under strict rules, visits, rare. But sometimes close relatives are allowed a short meeting. Almost always they grant the right to a last meal within prison rules. The stories of these orders have long become part of grim folklore. Ted Bundy chose a simple set: steak, eggs, baked potato, and a cup of coffee. John Wayne Gacy, a bucket of KFC fried chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. Selected people are present at the execution: relatives of the victim, the prisoner's family, journalists, and representatives of the law. And one more fact that is rarely grasped at first. Many sit on the death row for 10, 20, and even more years because of multi-stage appeals and legal procedures. Time stretches like rubber, and this too is part of the punishment. How long do you wait? Sometimes longer than seems possible. In the Chinese system of prosecution, the percentage of convictions is staggering. About 99 out of 100 cases end in a confession of guilt. The result? Thousands of death sentences annually. The main methods: shooting and lethal injection. Injections, legalized in the 1990s, are often carried out in special state mobile vans. The condemned person is strapped to a table inside the vehicle, and the procedure happens right there, quickly and without the public. Another deep fault line in the topic: reports of post-mortem organ removal from the executed without their consent. Human rights advocates have been writing for years. China is the world leader in the number of sentences carried out, and there is almost no official transparency. Why did the emphasis shift to injections? They are cheaper, quieter, and allow not transporting the prisoner back to prison. But the death penalty vans themselves are shrouded in secrecy. Names, dates, details are concealed. Everything happens quickly, almost without traces, as if the page of history were torn out and burned. Every year, according to human rights defenders, hundreds of sentences are carried out in Iran. The problem is at the very beginning of the chain. People are often denied a lawyer immediately after detention, and confessions are extracted through torture. Where is justice if pain becomes the decisive evidence? In Rajai Shar prison, cases of transferring those awaiting execution to solitary confinement before it is carried out have recently become more frequent. This makes the last hours as closed as possible. Usually the condemned are shackled both on the hands and on the feet to rule out attempts at self-harm or resistance. The pattern is known. On Saturday, they are moved to isolation. On Wednesday, the sentence is carried out. Food in solitary is only state-provided, and prisoners often call it inedible. In the common sections, they are allowed to cook themselves, and many simply throw away the state ration. The last meeting with family is a blow that, according to those who went through it, hurts more than the execution itself. To say goodbye means to understand there is no road back. Saudi Arabia. Little is known about the inner workings of the death corridor here. The system is closed. But there are numbers. In 2024, the kingdom executed 198 people, a record since 1990. Contrary to earlier promises to narrow the application of the ultimate measure, executions have increased, especially in cases related to drugs. Human rights defenders also speak of a political component. The death penalty is used against dissidents, including Shiite activists who participated in the protests of 2011-2013. Between May and June of 2024, 3 foreigners from Syria and Nigeria were executed. The world reacts harshly. Where are the standards of a fair trial? Why are basic guarantees ignored? There is no answer so far. Egypt is steadily in the top 5 of world leaders by the number of sentences carried out. From 2018 to 2020, not fewer than 241 executions, and 2020 became the peak, 152, the highest figure in the country's history. What brings the ultimate measure? Murders, terrorism, crimes against state security. Civilians are hanged. The military are shot. Little is known about the daily life of the death block, but reports paint the same picture. Long isolation, suddenness of the date, a minimum of contact with the outside world. Even lawyers and families rarely see each other. This is called the death corridor phenomenon. The punishment is not only the outcome, but also the waiting. Separately, about minors. As a participant in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Egypt cannot execute those who were younger than 18 at the time of the crime. The legal line is drawn clearly, although life beyond it still remains gray. Indonesia. Over the past 20 years, nearly 300 people have ended up on the death track here, and approximately 186 in drug cases. In 2015, after an unofficial pause, the country executed 23 people. The method? Shooting. The scheme looks like this. At least 72 hours in advance, they announce the date. On the day of execution, they transfer the person to solitary and then take them to a remote location. The squad, 12 shooters. The condemned may sit or stand. The eyes are usually blindfolded. Lawyers said that in 2015, some were kept together in one room for several days before the execution. A grim waiting where every glance is a time counter. The new criminal code, adopted in 2023, added an unexpected option: 10 years of a probationary period for those who sincerely repented and behaved without violations. Based on its results, the capital article can be replaced with life imprisonment. A second chance? Yes, but after 10 years in the shadows. Mauritania. Executions are currently halted by a moratorium, but this does not mean that life on the death row is soft. There is little information. As a rule, the condemned live in the same conditions as other prisoners. There is simply no space for isolation because of overcrowding. Most are held in Brugreit, a remote complex in the middle of the desert, far from families and human rights defenders. There are few lawyers willing to take on such cases. Threats and pressure do their job. By law, children up to 16 are not executed, but teenagers from 16 to 18 can be sentenced to the ultimate measure. Formally, death row inmates must be placed in special cells and monitored around the clock to prevent escape. Money? In 2017, Less than $1 per person per day was allocated for food and hygiene. The amount had not been revised for years. It is not surprising that many survive thanks to rare family parcels. The desert is not only around the prison, but also on the plate. Belarus. Since 1991, according to estimates, more than 300 sentences have been carried out. Belarus is the only country in Europe where the death penalty is still applied. And the principle, silence is also an answer, reigns here. The date is not announced in advance, and the procedure itself is a state secret. Most of the condemned for aggravated murders. They are kept in special blocks of the pretrial detention facility on Wolodarskogo Street and in Okrestina. But the most famous site is Pretrial Detention Center Number 1 in the center of Minsk, partly located in an old 19th century building. Access for journalists and activists? Minimal. According to former employees, prisoners are forbidden to sit or lie on the bed outside of sleeping hours. They say they are forced to walk around the cell in circles. Letters are lost, visits are strictly limited. Besides the lawyer, close relatives can see them only once a month. Executions take place in a special room to which only insiders have access. The condemned is led in with a blindfold. Families learn about what happened weeks or months later, when they are given a box with personal belongings. Bodies are not handed over. Burial places are kept secret. The question, where to say goodbye, remains unanswered. Iraqi. In 2024, the scale and speed of executions sharply increased, so human rights defenders write. In January, it was reported that at least 150 prisoners in Nasiriyah faced immediate execution without notification. In total, about 8,000 people are in the death corridor, according to estimates. The state does not publish official statistics. Requests for transparency are rejected. One relative recounted, in his loved one's death certificate, the cause was execution, but no obvious marks were visible on the body. And after a while, armed men from the security forces watched the grave and pressured the family. Why? The relatives are convinced, so that they would not succeed in exhumation and an independent examination. They were never provided with an official autopsy. This is not just a story about law. This is a story about fear, silence, and control, even after death, as if the state continues a dialogue in which you are forbidden to speak. Singapore. Here, the ultimate measure is applied for an extremely limited set of crimes: premeditated murder and large-scale drug trafficking. In the 1990s and early 2000s, from 1991 to 2004, more than 400 sentences were carried out, one of the highest per capita rates in the world at that time. For trafficking certain quantities of prohibited substances, the death penalty is a mandatory norm. The method, hanging; the place, Changi Prison; the time, early Friday morning. Detailed protocols about the last call, the last meal, and other details are not officially disclosed. As of March 2022, there were 62 people on death row. The minimum age of responsibility for this article is 18 at the time of the crime. The formula is simple and strict. The rules are announced in advance. Singapore insists that it applies them sparingly, but on principle. The dispute over whether fear of punishment works as a deterrent does not subside here. By law, the Minister of Justice must approve and set the date of execution within 6 months after the final sentence. In reality, people spend on death row, on average, about 15 years. Appeals and reviews drag on endlessly. By 2023, there were 106 people in the queue. In the same year, 3 died in prison without ever seeing their sentence carried out. The last execution was on the 26th of July, 2022. Tomohiro Kato was hanged for killing 7 people during an attack in Tokyo in 2008. The main feature of the Japanese system is total secrecy and psychological pressure. The prisoner is told about the execution roughly an hour beforehand. Imagine, you live every day as if it could be your last, and only you and the walls know it. Families and lawyers learn afterward. The cells are solitary, surveillance is round the clock. Here time is the hammer of a metronome measuring out the unknown. Thailand. For drugs, one can receive the ultimate measure, and this hits women especially hard. They are disproportionately numerous on death row precisely for drug articles. Prisons are overcrowded, resources are scarce, conditions are harsh. Unlike ordinary prisoners, those sentenced to death do not have access to work programs and rehabilitation. As of March 2018, there were 510 people on death row, more than half for drugs. Historically, the country executed by shooting, but since October 2003, the only method is lethal injection. There is almost no public information about the last hours, who calls, what one eats, who is present. The details remain behind closed doors. But there is an important option. Within 60 days after the Supreme Court's decision, the prisoner may file a royal petition for pardon. The review period is not limited. While the king deliberates, the execution is postponed. It is like pressing pause when the song has almost finished playing. Pakistan. One of the harshest systems in the world. By estimates, the country accounts for about 26% of all people awaiting execution on the planet. By 2024, 6,161 people, and this is an increase compared to the previous year. Since 2004, not fewer than 4,500 death sentences have been handed down, on average almost one per day. There have been no executions since December 2019, but there are more than 31 articles. Prison overcrowding is not abstract. People are sometimes placed in rooms of less than 8 square meters with several people. Diseases, tuberculosis, scabies, gastrointestinal disorders, spread quickly. Prisoners from the death block are moved daily from cell to cell and kept under constant surveillance. Outdoor time, 1 hour a day and only in shackles. Education is permissible, but communication is through bars. Family and lawyer visits are under control. Confidentiality is practically absent. On average, from sentence to execution, 11 years. The body is usually released to the family. If there is no one to claim it, it is buried in a prison cemetery. The final point is set quickly, but the path to it is agonizingly long. Yemen. By the rate of executions per capita, the country is among the leaders. In the north, where the Houthis hold power, sentences have increased and public executions are not rare. In May 2024, a court controlled by the Houthis sentenced 44 people to death for alleged cooperation with the coalition led by Saudi Arabia. There is little information about how people live and die in death cells. War takes not only lives, but also transparency. The last recorded case of executing a minor, the 21st of July, 1993, a 13-year-old boy, Nira, and 3 others were executed for grave crimes. After that, the parliament introduced amendments prohibiting the execution of those who were under 18 at the time of the crime. The law exists, but when shots are fired around you, laws often sound like a whisper. Botswana. Here, the ultimate measure is applied mainly for murders with aggravating circumstances. Paradoxically, the country's constitution guarantees the right to life, and at the same time, Botswana remains the only country in the southern African region where executions continue. One of the most high-profile cases, Mariette Bosch, a citizen of South Africa. In 1999, she was sentenced for the murder of her lover's wife, and in 2001, she was executed, the 4th woman since the country's independence, and one of the few white women executed in Africa. The process took place in secret. The family was not notified in advance. There have been outright violations. A condemned man was executed without the 24-hour notice required by law. His mother and lawyer were not even allowed a visit the day before. They learned about his death from a radio news broadcast. The body was not returned to the family. The right to say goodbye is a luxury that may not be available here. Somalia. Lawful executions are carried out by firing squads. Sharia law operates in the country alongside civil law. Decisions of Islamist courts may provide for beheading and even stoning. Since the beginning of the 21st century, the situation has been complicated by armed groups. They have carried out extrajudicial executions without state sanction. Amid instability and a protracted conflict, the boundaries of what is permissible blur. August 2024 shocked the world. The authorities of Puntland, a semi-autonomous region, announced the execution of 4 minors. They were accused of crimes committed before the age of 18 and of links with an armed group. At the same time, Somalia is a participant in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Do you grasp the tragedy? International law says one thing, reality, another. In the United Arab Emirates, the ultimate measure is provided for murder, terrorism, espionage, and other serious crimes against national security. The only method? Shooting. Both citizens and foreigners may find themselves on the defendant's bench. The last widely known execution dates to 2017. Important features of the process. Confessions are often obtained without a lawyer's participation. There is no bail for serious charges. Jury trials are not provided. The machine of justice moves quickly and strictly by regulation, without a people's jury room, and with minimal room for improvisation. India. In most cases, death sentences are eventually commuted to life imprisonment. The system of appeals is long, and the courts are overloaded. This time eats up health as well. A shortage of food, hygiene, and medicine, overcrowded prisons, remoteness from cities. All this makes family visits rare or impossible. In 2018, lower courts handed down 162 death sentences, a record for almost 20 years. Then came a decline. In 2019, 103. In 2020, 77. The law prohibits executing minors, but it also happens that in 2016-18, people received the ultimate measure, and later it turned out, at the time of the crime, they were younger than 18. Documents in the country are easily lost, and the truth reaches the court too late. Many death row inmates live in special barracks solitaries. Free hours, from 3 to 12 per day, depending on the prison. Someone says, "Upon entry, the warden simply showed me the gallows." Another recalled a photo of those very gallows on a guard's phone. Another detail that sends chills down the spine. Sometimes guards asked prisoners to write them into their last wish as executioners. A job paid about $270. Vietnam. Until recently, executions were by firing squads. 7 police officers, the condemned, to a post, eyes blindfolded. Since November 2011, a transition to lethal injections. From the 1st of July 2016, the ultimate measure was abolished for 7 offenses. For example, for disobeying an order or damaging national security facilities. There are exceptions and humanitarian frames. The death penalty is not applied to minors, pregnant women, and women caring for children up to 36 months. Their sentence is commuted to life imprisonment. Separate complex provisions concern the elderly and officials who return illicit gains. But in each case, their own legal nuances apply. The numbers before the transition period are staggering. From the 6th of August, 2013, to the 30th of June, 2016, 429 people were executed. From July 2011 to June 2016, 1,134 were sentenced to death. How many are waiting for execution today is unknown. After the death of Kim Jong-il in December 2011, power passed to Kim Jong-un. And alas, systemic human rights violations did not disappear. There is no opposition. There is no free press. Religious organizations are banned. Arrests are arbitrary. Courts are a formality. Torture is commonplace. Punishment can be collective. Together with the guilty, his or her relatives suffer. Labor camps fill with entire families. Public executions are a reality behind the Iron Curtain, for theft of state property, for hoarding food, for anti-socialist behavior. The criminal code vaguely formulates two big baskets: crimes against the state and crimes against the people, and this gives the authorities almost any room for interpretation. In 2007, the list was expanded, up to non-violent offenses such as fraud and smuggling. Eyewitness testimonies chill the blood. In 2012, Human Rights Watch collected stories of death sentences for, it would seem, trifles. A stolen piece of metal wire, glass removed from a portrait of Kim Jong-il. Those who help people flee across the border with China are also punished. For what? Because the authorities said so. Would you personally be able to step inside the corridor of death to see everything with your own eyes? Write in the comments. If the episode was useful, give it a like. Want more? Choose the next video on the screen or visit our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.